Welcome to Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly review. My name is Tony Martin, and I write a little blog called howtogetthejob.blog. Over the next 30 minutes, we are going to be talking about how to use follow-up questions for your advantage during an interview. You got ghosted? It's not just a phenomenon for dating anymore, and nobody cares about you and why that's a good thing. And then we'll get to your Q&A. Again, my name is Tony Martin. This is How to Get the Job. If you don't know who I am, I write a blog called How to Get the Job. I also do resume writing, mock interview coaching, and I do corporate training where I help corporate clients really maximize their hiring process, ensuring that when they're hiring people, they're actually hiring strategically so they're not having to backfill. So I help companies with the retention numbers and things like that. But today, let's talk a little bit about you and the job process and where you currently are. Before we get to that, let's quickly do a federal update. I always like doing this, especially right now with so many things changing in the environment, and I want you to be able to kind of know where you're going. So first of all, we talked last week about executive orders. I'm not a fan of them, to recap, but the president did sign an executive order which allowed for a $400 check to be on top of your state unemployment benefits. Originally, it was $600. That expired on July 31st. Republicans, Democrats in the House, in the Senate, couldn't agree on anything, can't get anything done. President wrote an executive order. I don't think executive orders are right. I don't think, in this case, I don't think this executive order is exactly constitutional. However, he found $44 billion that was tucked away for a disaster relief fund, and he reallocated that for this. The catch was that every state, if they were going to give the $400 to each unemployed individual who's on benefits, they would have to enter a contract for those individuals. Looks like most states didn't sign that contract, but I do know that some of those checks have already gone out and have been deposited for $300, at least in Arizona. I have some confirmed reports that Arizona is receiving some of those checks. We'll see how the rest of the states follow suit, but they're only getting $300, which means the state didn't actually want to pony up the extra $100. So just so you had a quick update there. And then the other thing I really wanted to share with you was the market. So the market has rebounded shockingly from where it was. Let's do this. You have to look at me. The market has rebounded from pre-COVID. So you can see that before COVID, it was at, what is that, 33.86. It bottomed out 1 month later, the end of the bear market, at what was it, 22.38, so about a 34% decline. And now from this point right here, we've grown back 51.7% to get back to where we were. When I looked at it a few minutes ago, we were 33.84, so 2 points off of the all-time high. We had, well, 2 points off of the previous all-time high, but this week we've gone up to, I think it was 33.90 or somewhere in that ballpark. So bottom line, the market's recovered. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? It's, I guess, a good thing if you got 401ks, but overall, probably we're going to have those chickens come home to roost at some point, right? Because the market is being artificially propped up with trillions of dollars that we're pumping into it. And truthfully, though, that's why demand is coming back to some degree so quickly and so ferociously, even though much of the country is still closed. So let's make sure that we pay attention to that. I will continue to keep everyone up to date there. But I just thought it was good news. And let's celebrate good news in this whole world where everything is so negative all the time. Once in a while, when we have a win, okay, let's go for it. Now, let's talk about using follow-up questions to your advantage. Then we're going to talk about being ghosted. We got a lot to get to. And then we'll talk about how no one cares about you and why that's a good thing briefly before we get to your Q&A. As always, feel free to type in your questions now, get them ready. I always go to live questions first. And if I had like 20 seconds to read the question and digest it before I actually pop it up on the screen, then chances are you might get a more thoughtful answer. But usually I just digress into those answers and you just kind of hear my loud internal monologue there. So let's talk a little bit about follow-up questions though. Follow-up questions. Often in interviews, I use follow-up questions to get to the real question, okay? We've talked about this before, but we as interviewers really try to use the follow-up question as the real question. What do I mean by that? When you're interviewing with me, I'm going to ask you something like, tell me about a time you were unfairly criticized. Look, we've all been unfairly criticized. That's not really the question, okay? It doesn't matter what your answer is as long as I can dissect that it was really unfair and it was a fair criticism and why you don't think it's justified. But I don't really get those details until I give you my follow-up questions, which will say, well, what was your relationship like with the person that criticized you before? Was it a fair criticism in retrospect, showing self-awareness? There's lots of things I'll ask you, but you can do the same thing during the interview because there's going to be things that you care about that you're afraid to ask. You're going to be afraid to ask if you're a single parent, hey, what's the work-life balance here in the office? Because guess what? If you ask that, you are going to assume, and I think rightfully assume, that the person receiving that question is going to naturally think that you want a lot of time off. You're not going to be able to work a normal 9-to-5 job. You're just going to be a difficult person to schedule and work with. I don't think that's true necessarily, but there is going to be an assumption there. So how do you ask the question, hey, what's the work-life balance here, without dismissing yourself from the opportunity? First, ask an open-ended question about the culture. Okay, hey, what's the culture like here? Hopefully, by asking that question, they're going to lead you on a rabbit trail that will let you ask a follow-up question about time. Or maybe they'll even go into, hey, look, we're really flexible with flexible work time here. And then you can go, hey, look, at my previous company, flexible time meant this. In the company I'm currently at, flexible time meant this. Two different things. What do you guys define as flexible time? Perfectly reasonable question, but that's going to let you kind of know as to where they stand on, does your butt have to be in the office for 40 plus hours a week, or can you work from home? Now, obviously during COVID-19, it's going to be a different answer, but you're going to have to ask that question for the culture pre-COVID and post-COVID, or not pre, but post and during COVID, and also say, once we get out of COVID, or what was the culture like before COVID? You can ask that kind of question. That's going to give you an indication. Next thing you can use is your experience to draw on what you think the answer would be, meaning perhaps you're looking at the job description or throughout the course of the interview, and you always use your questions to show you have knowledge. So maybe in this job, you're going to be upgrading a system pretty soon. And they've already said that, hey, look, if you come on board, we're going to be upgrading the system in 3 months, and we expect it to be a 2 or 3 month project. You can come back and go, hey, look, when I upgraded this type of system 5 years ago, 6 months ago, 2 weeks ago in my old company, it took us 7 months because we only had 2 people dedicated to this project. You guys want to get this done in 3 months. How many people do you have dedicated to the project? Is it realistic? You want to ask that kind of question, because if they say, oh, no, you're going to have a whole bunch of people, or, well, look, it's going to be tough for those 3 weeks because you're going to be working nights and days, weekends, blah, 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 blah. I mean, bottom line, they're going to give you an indication of the expectations and what the culture's like, which then leads me to my next question. You might be looking at that job description, you might be talking to them, and you might think the company goals or the department goals that they have laid out for you aren't realistic. And you don't want to say, I don't think these goals are realistic. Because if you say that, then, well, hey, you're not a team player. You can't get on board. You can't help fix our problems. So what you're going to say is, hey, so on the current team 7 people, or whatever, who do we have on the team that you think probably isn't suitable for the team, isn't the right type of person? You don't have to tell me who they are, but do we have some of those that you don't think are high performers that we probably need to figure out new ways, new roles for, or maybe figure out exit strategies, just so I can be aware of how strong my team is? By you asking that question, you're going to find out if you have the authority to make the changes to actually improve the company or improve your department. That question right there is going to lead you to so many potential follow-ups that you're really going to have a good indication of what kind of company and team you're joining and going to be leading potentially. Next question, maybe the commute, okay? The commute's a pain. If you live in Houston or anywhere, there's going to be difficult commutes from time to time. You can ask them, hey, this also, if you're worried about the commute and being like in the office at 9 or 8 or 7 because you got to drop kids off or pick up kids and you can't leave, if you want to leave at 4, just ask them again, work-life balance. Ask them the culture question. Okay, that culture question again will lead you to flexible discussion, which will then lead you to saying, hey, in my previous company, you could say things like, we really didn't maximize our ability to utilize people to their fullest. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, we are a structured company that we required people to be sitting in their chair from 8 to 5. And as a result, people just assumed that when the day was over, they were unplugged. Weekend, nothing got done. In the company before that, though, it was really more of a healthy balance. And what does that mean? That meant that people, when they were in the office, they worked. And then when people are home, they worked, because sometimes they were leaving 2 or 3 hours early on certain days because they had different things going on. Now, you're not going to change their culture in an interview. You're someone new that they don't care about yet. We'll get to that. But you are at least going to plant a seed of, well, if we bring this person on board, they might be able to help shift us from what we're currently doing to what might work. And frankly, during COVID-19, if you're not working from home, chances are you're not surviving as a company, because I think most companies have figured out some sort of balance. Actually, I know for a fact, the Gallup poll back at the end of March said that within 2 weeks, 31% of companies that were had some contingent working from home. Within 2 weeks, it went to like 63%. So it doubled the number of people who are working from home in companies that previously only 31% of companies actually people working from home. Now that is 100% for sure. But you realize in 2 weeks how dramatically that's a shift for those companies and what that meant for their cultures and how they had to adapt and move on. And I think now that we're looking at everything, we're really figuring out that, guess what? We're surviving. Those companies who have people working from home, they're still getting things done. So we'll see what that means in the future. Last question that you might be concerned about or interested about. Maybe you're concerned that the boss you're going to be working for is a micromanager. But you can't say, hey, are you a micromanager? Because I'm working for a micromanager and he's kind of a jerk. But what you can say is, what kind of leader are you? And open-ended question, allow them to kind of expand. And then you can have some follow-up questions which kind of address it. But by having a friendly, open-ended question, it'll really give you the opportunity to digress more into those follow-ups, to be casual and comfortable, not so, I guess, stressful and structured. Okay? Now, you got ghosted. First of all, this is from an article by Andrew Seaman. He is a LinkedIn employee, and because he's a LinkedIn employee, I quote him a lot because I subscribe to him. You should too. And he has a lot of information because people just want to talk to him. Because guess what? When you work for the mothership called LinkedIn, it's amazing how people are available to you because they know by you talking to them, you're going to then help elevate their status. So he's got a good article, though, about being ghosted. And this is more for HR professionals, okay? This is less so for candidates. But I guess I will say this. I work with executive candidates. I work with VP levels, and I work with C-suite executives all the time. And every single one of those candidates has been ghosted in their current levels and roles. So there's hope, okay? If you've been ghosted, you're not the only one. It's going to happen again and again. It's very unprofessional. It's very annoying. And the reason why it happens is people are just uncomfortable with conflict. And me saying, Joe, you're not a fit for this role, we're moving in another direction, it's just an unpleasant conversation. And it's much easier to just not talk to Joe. But here's the problem. So HR folks, here's the problem. If you ghost enough people in your career, let's just play this logically. We have a funnel, a recruiting funnel. And for those of you who don't know, it means that we start off with a pool of applicants and our job is to slowly bring it down to one hire. Sometimes it's not very slow. Sometimes it's, you have a whole bunch of applicants, you interviewed one guy you like and you move them down. But bottom line, it's supposed to be a funnel. It's a funnel for a reason. But that really means that for every one person you hire, you're probably talking to 10, 12, maybe 15 people. We'll just say 10 people you talk to for every one person you hire, which is probably not realistic, but for the simple math, we'll do it that way. That means that you are not going to hire 9 people for every one person you do hire, which means if you ghost the majority or all of those people because it's bad news, now at the end of a month, maybe you've hired 10 people, you've now ghosted 90 people. At the end of a year, you might have ghosted 1,000 people and hired, I don't know, 100 or something like that. What does that mean? That means that your network of people who don't like you is a lot bigger than the network of people who do like you. You're not just turning them off from your brand, but you're turning them off from you. And you might say, well, who really cares? I have the job. I'm trying to hire people. It doesn't matter. I promise you, if you're hiring C-suite or higher level individuals and you don't get back to them the way you're supposed to, if they are in ever a position to hire you to be working for them, they will not. It's networking. Everything is networking, right? I say this all the time. If interviewing somebody is a networking opportunity for you, or if you're being interviewed by someone and that's a networking opportunity for you, then when you're the recruiter and you're interviewing people, that's a networking opportunity for you as well. And you have a great opportunity to network a heck of a lot more people than the average person. And because you're talking to people who are talented and they're looking for opportunities and they made it to your phone call, they're probably a valuable person. So for nothing else, be selfish and follow up with them. So that way, if you ever need them, they can say, oh yeah, you know what? You treated me well, because I can't tell you, as I start my business right now of resume writing and mock interviews, the fact that I've been doing it correctly for over 15 years has benefited me greatly, because so many candidates, or so many of my clients now, were candidates, were employees, were people I couldn't even hire. But what happened? They all trusted me, and they're all using me now to work on their resumes. So I just say that as we reap what we sow. It's a biblical truth, and it's true in business as well. All right, no one cares about you. Let's quickly get through this, because I've been teasing it for 2 weeks. And if you haven't had a chance to watch the video a couple of weeks ago, where it's about 6-7 minutes, do. But let me briefly go over why this is a good thing. Okay, first of all, your job in an interview is to get somebody to care about you. Okay, that's your job. Your job is to get them to like you. Your job is to get them to care about you. But it's very liberating to know that they don't care about you on the front end. Why? Because you don't have to put a whole bunch of stuff on your resume that's not relevant to the job, okay? You don't have to worry necessarily about them picking at something from your past if it's not going to affect your performance in the company or be a relevant question for them. You don't need to worry about your GPA from 18 years ago if you've been working for 18 years and it was a low GPA. There's certain things they just don't care about. But here's what it means too, is that you have a responsibility to get them to care about you. You have a responsibility to show them that you have prioritized this role in your life. And what does that mean? That means, first, when you're interviewing, you're agreeable. I don't mean you're going to say yes to morally and unethical things, but you're going to be agreeable with times and schedules and their availability. If they say, hey, we need you to come in next week on Tuesday or Wednesday at these 2 times, what works for you? You better make one of those times work for you. Or if they don't, it better be something big, and it can't be, oh, well, I have a hair appointment that I can't do it. No, it has to be something important, because if you don't prioritize the role, why am I going to prioritize you as a candidate? And you're sending a message, more importantly, that if you're this difficult to impress us during an interview process, how much more difficult are you going to be to work with when we're actually doing the job and you're part of the team? Okay, so that's the first thing. Next, make sure that when you are interviewing, you know what part of the process you're in, okay? When you're interviewing on the phone screen, the first interview, which often asks questions about qualifications, education, experience, and maybe compensation, they don't need long soliloquies of answers, because they don't care. This is the first level, just to make sure you're qualified for the job. You don't need to give a 17-minute answer for every single question about why. If they ask you a yes or no experience question for experience, do you have 15 years of experience working on mud pumps? Yes. They don't need any more than that. Or they can say, yes, I've been doing it for about 22 years over the course of my career. They don't need every great example of you working on a mud pump. If they ask you questions about different things, know that the first phone screen, nobody cares. They just care about, are you going to be able to do the job? Are you qualified to do the job? Am I going to embarrass myself by presenting you to the hiring manager? And are you going to fit with inside the budget? That's it. Okay. So hobbies in general, nobody cares you have hobbies. You don't need to put it in your resume. Don't need to talk about being a king crab fisherman. Might be cool, but nobody cares. I think that's kind of where I want to touch base on that today. There's so much more that I really go into on the interview process in one of my videos. Go check it out. Certainly subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can check that out there. I like to make sure that I put all my content on there. And let's just do a quick plug for that before we get to the Q&A. So we'll get to the Q&A now. So if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to type those in. Fortunately, if you don't, I still have a bunch, because yesterday on the LinkedIn show, I got 3 live Q&A questions that I want to address today, as well as plenty for my clients this week. But quick commercial break. If you like this video, if you prefer the Q&A section, always subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do 2 of these shows a week. Usually the Q&A is a different part of the show. And usually the Q&A also has a good section on it of just a good variety of information. So feel free to skip ahead to the 20-minute marker of the video on YouTube, and you can start watching Q's and A's. All right. Let me check it out. I don't think we have any live questions today, so great. So the first question I got yesterday was from Narita. She's in Houston, and she asks, is it a good sign if the recruiter brings up salary on the first interview? My answer to Narita was, look, it's not a good or a bad sign. And frankly, I'm just very surprised if the recruiter doesn't bring up salary on the first phone call. You need to be prepared to answer the question about salary, because truthfully, why am I going to present you to the hiring manager if I don't know if you're going to take the job? The hiring manager is busy enough. Everyone in the process is busy enough. I don't need to spend hours of my coworkers' times interviewing you if you're a wild card, if you're going to accept the offer or not. So most of the time, them bringing up salary is just them doing their job. If they haven't brought up salary, it might mean they just don't know what the salary actually is, or they're not comfortable talking about numbers because they're just so new at this. But I would be surprised if they don't bring up salary. But if they don't feel like you have to, okay? That's important too. Feel free just to kind of let that one sit and move on to the next round, hopefully. Next, Russ and Clear Lake. In the day after email, to follow up on the interview, what's the best way to phrase that you'd like to be included in the next round, the final round of interviews, and that you're excited to be joining the team? I think it's just that. You don't need to overthink the follow-up email. Your follow-up email, when you are done interviewing with each person, the very next day, you should email each person individually and CC the recruiter. You CC the recruiter because they like to know that you're actually following up with these people. They're the ones that are like kind of the advocate for who they want to be hired at the end of the day. The recruiter has the least amount of authority, but almost the most amount of power, most amount of influence, because they can then go to the hiring manager and go, look, Joe was the only one, or Russ was the only one that followed up with every single one of you guys with an individual personalized email because I was CC'd on it. So they're going to lobby for you. So you want to make sure that you actually do that. You want to make sure that you're actually touching on something that you discussed during the interview. It can't just be a generic, hey, I'm really excited to be moving forward in the process. No, it's got to be, really enjoyed our conversation yesterday. I thought it was really interesting. Pick a detail that was interesting. Pick something that you think you can really improve on. Expand on something that you think you maybe sold yourself short on. Not a book, few lines. And then conclude it by saying exactly that. I'm really excited to see where this process moves forward to, and hopefully I'll be hearing from you soon, type of thing. Next, Stephen in Houston. How do you answer the question, how would you structure this department when you don't work there and fully understand their problems? That's a really interesting question, because this is obviously kind of comes back to the authority, right? You want to make sure that you're going to have the authority to make the changes needed, but you also kind of want to have the heads up if they're even self-aware enough to know that there needs to be changes. So I would personally ask, and I've done this, and I've said, you know, hey, as you look at your team, what are the weak points? Why is it that you're actually hiring someone outside of the organization for this role and not promoting from within? That question is a very powerful question, which will let you know company culture. Oh, we don't ever promote from within. You might hear someone say that. I've heard people say that. Or you might hear, we got a really green team, they're really, really new, and we need a strong leader. You might hear lots of different answers, but each one's going to give you some indication as to why they're in the situation they are in, and maybe what kind of leader they're looking for, which will then help shape your interviews moving forward, because maybe that's the second of 4 interviews. And now by them saying that, your next person you speak with, you now have that little nugget of information in your mind about what's going on at the organization and team and why they're interviewing you. And then when you're able to discuss that, you're able to say, hey, I think, and always do this, okay, this is my knee-jerk reaction. I rarely will say, I know, blah, blah, blah. Because truthfully, even the things I know I'm often wrong on because there's some obscure situation where I'm wrong. And it's very arrogant for me to walk into an interview and say, hey, I know you guys are struggling with this, this, and this. Because you know what? It's like me picking on the people I want to hire me and saying, I know you're screwed up here. They're not going to like that kind of response. But I would much rather say, hey, I think you're struggling with some of these areas. Am I right? Because then it gives them a chance to go, no, you're wrong, or yes, you're right. Either way, it shows some self-awareness, because maybe you really do know, because you have an inside track to what's going on in that company. But either way, by saying I think, it's a much more palatable question. It's a much more comfortable way of presenting information to ensure that you're getting on the same side, not creating an adversarial relationship early on. All right, Marianne in Houston. How far back should a resume go? I've been told 10 years. Marianne, no. Now, me saying no is an absolute statement. And if you watch me at least once a week, I say I hate absolute statements. So, Marianne, for the most part, the person who told you a resume should go back 10 years is wrong. Here's why. You never know what experience from your past is going to be the most important for the job you're applying for tomorrow. Okay, we might all assume naturally that if I was a recruiting manager today, then tomorrow I'm applying to recruiting manager roles. But once in a while, guess what? The market sucks. Or once in a while, the opportunities aren't there and we have to take a step back. And we might have to go take one level back, or maybe we take 3 levels up and we're now a director. But you know what? We didn't like being a director. We want to get back to the operations. We want to stop leading people. Well, if I've forgotten that information or if I've expunged it, that's a word, from my resume, now I got to go back and reinvent the wheel because maybe the experience from 11 years ago is the most relevant experience for the job I'm applying for right now. Now, if the experience from 15, 16 years ago is the most relevant experience, then chances are you want to switch from a chronological resume to a functional format. If you don't know how to do that, let me know. I will gladly help you with that. That's kind of what I do a lot of the time, is help people figure out what format works best for them. But those general statements of you should never, or it should only go back 10 years. Now you can do things is wrong, okay? But you can do things like additional experience and make that stuff more condensed should you determine that that experience isn't relevant for the job you're applying for. But realize again that every job is different and you don't want to have just one resume that's going to be the same for everybody. All right, we got 3 minutes left. Gay, thanks for watching. And we'll go to Sharon in Orlando this week. Actually, this was last week. Asked me, I got an interview for a job that I'm not excited about after hearing more about the role during the phone screen. Okay, so I guess she got the job interview. She's not excited about after her initial interview. Should she still move forward to take the follow-up interviews? My advice for this is generally yes, okay? See, I didn't say always yes, but generally yes. Here's why, okay? You don't know where people are gonna be in the future, meaning you're interviewing with 3 or 4 people at that company. You may not be excited about that opportunity at that company, but you don't know where those 3 or 4 people might be in 6 months from now. They might all be in 3 or 4 different companies. So by you actually meeting with them, you're networking and you're building your network, and you're able to then hopefully make a good impression that they're going to remember you, and you're going to have then a connection where you can kind of follow them as you're going through your career. You might have a bigger network to then leverage. 6 months down the road, they might be somewhere else, and you can reach out to them personally. That. Next. It depends on why you don't want to interview there. Maybe you've looked up information that they're not a good company, that they have a bad culture or whatever, but you need to experience that stuff for yourself, because sometimes those reviews that are written on Glassdoor and those other different company websites, maybe it's a disgruntled employee who wrote that and it's not really relevant. So make sure that you go figure it out for yourself, okay? Next, now in this case, Sharon actually didn't feel like she was qualified for the job. So that was her big concern. I said, look, I'm not qualified for this job. Now I'm going to go interview for it. And what if I'm going to embarrass myself? No. Sharon, they know what your weaknesses are. As long as you weren't lying and hiding them, they know where your weaknesses are. And for everybody, if they know where your weaknesses are, take the interview, because there might be another opportunity that they're actually thinking about for you. Because very often when I'm interviewing people for different roles, I might be interviewing for a VP level role, and I interview Joe, and Joe's going to be, clearly Joe doesn't have enough experience, but he looks like he's a pretty sharp guy, so I'm going to interview Joe. And then in the interview, I've now earmarked Joe at the end of the interview. I don't think he's the director, but I know we're hiring a senior manager in 6 months for this department as well, who's going to come under the director. Let's keep Joe on the hook. Actually, let's bring Joe in, because by doing this, we're going to get a good indication if now we have a shortlisted candidate already 6 months before the next job goes live, and we can talk to Joe about that new opportunity. So always take these, because you don't know where they might lead. A good example for me too, okay, this will be a good example, and then we'll close on this. I took a job interview for a job I wasn't sure that I wanted. I interviewed here in Houston. It went well. When I left that interview, I wasn't intrigued though. I was like, this isn't the right opportunity for me for several reasons. I got a phone call the next day saying, hey, we loved you. We want you to come up to Chicago to meet with the corporate team. Will you come up? Of course, because it's a networking opportunity. Okay. I went up. I flew up. Well, they flew me up. It was a 3 day. It was 2 days and 3 interviews. At the end of the first day, it was paramount or apparent to me that I was not going to take this job. So I didn't want to get an offer at this point, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't hurt my reputation at the same time. So over the next 2 days, I planted seeds of doubt in the people's minds who were interviewing me by asking open-ended questions about my concerns, focusing on the initial question, not the follow-up question. What do I mean by that? The job was going to be a director in Houston, but to get any higher, I would be required to move to Chicago. And I said to them, I said, hey, on the second day, after I didn't want the job, hey, so it became apparent to me, I think yesterday, that that this is a director level role, over 8 people. That's fantastic. Everyone's located in Houston. But if I wanted to progress, is it realistic that Chicago is the only option? And I kind of did it in a way that my body language showed, even though I didn't say it, that I really didn't want to move to Chicago, nor did I ever have any indication or plans to move to Chicago. By me doing it that way, they're like, yeah, it would require to move to Chicago. This is kind of a role that we see this person for 18 months to 2 years. And I go, oh, okay. And I kind of let my energy level wean a little bit from that point forward to the rest of the interview on purpose. And guess what happened? A week later, I get a phone call. Hey, Tony, we're so sorry. At least they didn't ghost me. We're going to move forward with somebody else, which was great news, because I didn't want to get the offer and then turn them down and all that stuff. So there's certain times in the interview that you can also use those those regular questions to disqualify yourself, gently giving the interviewer a gracious way to back out, but maintaining that relationship. So anyway, I hope that all helps. I really appreciate everyone watching. If you did like it, feel free to put a little like, push a little thumbs up on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you're watching this from. As always, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel to get all these videos and more. I did a webinar yesterday on corporate culture. So if you're an HR professional, make sure you go check out that over there. It's talking about how to maintain your corporate culture, even though many of us are working from remote environments, and what you can do to keep engagement high, to make sure employees are being communicated well and fully informed of what's going on at the corporate level, as well as what leaders should be doing to make sure everyone feels like they're on the same page and you don't have a division of classes perhaps between the people who are in the office and the people that are at home. Really good information. Check it out over there on the YouTube channel. It's from yesterday. I think it was called Remote and Being Connected While Being Remote, or something like that. As always, feel free to share this with anyone you like. Hope to see you next week. And remember, if you need help finding a job, if you need help with your resume, interviewing, anything like that, connect with me so I can help show you how to get the job. I'll see you next time. I hope you have a great weekend. Bye.